I risked my life to save my crown prince husband, only to end up with my hands completely scarred and ruined. But he despised me, calling the scars on my hands disgusting.
Not only did he take a side consort just 3 days after our wedding,
but he even drove me to jump to my death. When I opened my eyes again, I have actually returned to the very day the crown prince was wounded. Amo.
Peking, you disgust me.
get away!
I snap my eyes open, gasping for air. The rancid, muddy stench of drowning water instantly floods my nose. I'm not dead? I look down at my hands. They are fair, smooth, and delicate. There is no sign of that hideous, jagged scar I got from saving Pei Jingwan. I've been reborn. I'm back to the day Pai Jingwan was ambushed and severely injured at the royal hunting grounds. The exact day I found him. Right now, this once arrogant crown prince is sprawled miserably in a filthy puddle. Pai Jingwan glares up at me, gritting his teeth in rage. With undisguised disgust in his eyes, he snarls, "Don't touch me! Seeing you throw yourself at me like a desperate dog only makes me sick." In my past life, seeing him hurt broke my heart. I was worried sick. I ignored his harsh shoves and cruel insults and gritted my teeth, carrying him out of this desolate wilderness on my own weak shoulders. But my devotion was repaid with betrayal. Just 3 days after our wedding, he brought in a mistress, allowing Chu-Chu to walk right in just to humiliate me. You only saved me because you had ulterior motives. Those hideous scars on your hands? Even one look makes me lose my appetite. This time, as I look down at Pei Jingwan lying in the mud like a dying dog, I don't cry out in panic like I did in my past life. Instead, I slowly and calmly stand up. I brush the mud from my skirt. My movement's so elegant, it looks as though I'm attending a royal banquet, rather than standing in the middle of a barren wasteland. Pai Jingwan freezes. His eyes, usually filled with cold disdain, are now wide with utter shock.
Shen Qinghe, 我还是罪人了你。
If you hadn't insisted on throwing yourself at me, I wouldn't have pushed you. His voice is harsh, but he can't hide the guilt creeping into his eyes. Since your highness finds me so disgusting, then I shall no longer be an eyesore to you. With a sharp flick of my hair, I turn and walk away.
薛庆害，我即听有公义。
Naturally, to get far away from your highness, as far as possible. Oh, and by the way, just a friendly warning. Keep your voice down. Those assassins from earlier, they haven't gone far yet. What if they get lured back here? I won't have the strength to save you a second time. Don't you dare walk away. Come back. I order you to come back. Does it hurt, Pai Jingwan? In my past life, when I carried you on my back to escape, every single step was 1,000 times more painful than this. The wind in the woods was freezing cold, but I felt incredibly liberated. Relying on my memories, I avoided the direction of the assassin's search, crossing mountains and valleys. Finally, just before dark, I reached the main road leading back to Jinling. By then, my clothes were in tattered rags, my hair was a disheveled mess, and both of my shoes were lost somewhere in the mountains. But I knew one thing. I was finally free. At the end of the pass, a very plain-looking carriage slowly approached. I stopped the carriage, but little did I know. Stopping it didn't just bring hope of returning home, but also unleashed the most dangerous taboo of my past life. Old sir, please, have mercy. Could you please give me a ride? I will have to ask my master first. The carriage was incredibly plain, without even a single proper decoration on it. Young master, I have been separated from my family. If you can take me back to Jinling.
Our family will reward you handsomely.
The Shen family? Of the Marquis of Pingdan in Jinling? Yes, exactly. The eldest daughter of the Shen family, Shen Qinghe. Shouldn't she be at the hunting grounds right now? Throwing herself at the crown prince? How did she end up begging for help on the roadside like this? This man actually knows who I am? The crown prince is surrounded by countless beauties. He doesn't need me there. Young master, it's getting late. If a defenseless woman like me is left in the wilderness, you must know what my fate would be. Sir, you should know that your reputation, Shen Qinghe, is not exactly good in Jinling. A man and a woman sharing a carriage, alone. Aren't you afraid of ruining your reputation? Reputation? That worthless thing literally killed me in my past life. If you're worried about your own reputation, young master, how about you just marry me? That way, we'll be a match made in heaven. And no one else will have anything to say. The man sitting inside the carriage actually possessed a face breathtaking enough to captivate the world. His narrow eyes were like dark, bottomless pools. He amusedly twirled a blood-stained dagger in his hand. I recognized that face. It was the infamous Ninth Prince, Pei Qinghe, exiled to the northern border for 10 years, a cold-blooded killer who wouldn't even blink.
P 森龙定动口锁.
You want me to marry you? His overwhelming, powerful aura was almost suffocating. Oh, my dear lady. The Ninth Prince is a man of unparalleled elegance, but once I clean myself up, I won't look too bad myself. This marriage is a guaranteed win-win for your highness.
P Shixing stared at me.
His gaze scraping across my face like a freezing cold blade.
Shen Qinghe.
Do you have any idea who you're talking to?
I do. Paisik.
Thank you. Suddenly, I felt a freezing chill against the tip of my ear. I reached up to touch it, only to find it was drenched in cold sweat. It's best you don't look inside. You'll have nightmares. I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'm only afraid of dying. A bloodthirsty madman like him is exactly the best shield I could ever ask for in this lifetime. Just as we were about to arrive at the gates of the Shen Qinghe estate, P Qinghe suddenly grabbed my wrist.
Shen Qinghe, now that you've entered my carriage,
You will never get the chance to step out again. But in the end, Pei Qinghe still let me out.
Shen Qinghe.
That apology you mentioned, I will keep it in mind. Pei Qinghe, we're going to have a lot of fun in this lifetime. The eldest young mistress is back. Quick, she's back. My lady, you're finally back. The old madam has almost cried herself blind. That was my wet nurse, already sobbing uncontrollably at this moment. The crowd solemnly parted to both sides. Supported by Shen Mingwan, old Madam Shen walked out with trembling step. Grandmother, it's Jai Zhao. Jia Zhao is finally home. I'm sorry for being so stubborn and making you worry. You're back. That's all that matters. You're finally home. Who on earth dared to hurt my precious girl? I, Jiang Sukin, swear I will make them pay for this in blood. I buried my face in my grandmother's embrace, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught two people watching us coldly.
陆路牙能善出庭。
Chow, oh couldn't drink a bowl of quail soup to calm your nerves. The scalding hot soup dripped down her delicate cheek and onto the floor. Shen Qinghe, what do you think you're doing? My wrist really has no strength left. Please don't blame me, Sister Chu. My grandmother pulled me close, her heart aching for me, and shot a cold, piercing glare at Lu Yan, scaring her so much that she swallowed her curses right back down. Hurry, save the Crown Prince. Save the Crown Prince. 3 days later, Pi Yan's men arrived right on schedule. The eunuch from the Eastern Palace had a grim, threatening look on his face. Before he could even open his mouth to demand answers, our Jia Zhao was crying out to save the Crown Prince, even in her dreams. Now she is gravely ill. If you still insist on making trouble, we'll take this straight to the Empress to let her decide who is right. The men from the Eastern Palace exchanged uneasy glances. After all, they didn't dare to act insolent in the face of the late Marquis Shen's final testament. They could only leave with their tails between their legs. When Shan Mingwan stepped into the room, I was struggling to get up and pay my respects. My eyes welled up with tears in an instant. I used to be so stubborn and willful. Only after this ordeal did I realize how hard you've worked to keep me safe, Father. Seeing me act so obedient and sensible, most of the anger my father had harbored for years instantly melted away. Watching this from the side, Shen Qinghe wrung her handkerchief in sheer frustration.
3 days later was the grand ancestral ceremony for Liu Ryan to be officially added to the family registry.
Shen Qinghe let out a cold, sinister smirk. The string of firecrackers meant to utterly ruin my reputation was already prepared. On the 4th day, thick incense smoke swirled inside the Shen family ancestral hall. Draped in a plain, simple cloak,
I stood with a pale face at the very back of the family's younger generation.
standing right next to me is Shen Qinghe. Sister, after today, my mother will be the official matriarch of this household. I don't say a word. I just stare at those solemn ancestral tablets, sneering in my heart. The ritual is complete. Elder Yang Xing announces the end of the ceremony. According to tradition,
This is when the firecrackers should go off and the music should play.
out of the corner of my eye, I catch Shen Qinghe's hand, moving slightly inside her sleeve, a smug, victorious smile playing on her lips.
Timing it perfectly, I cover my mouth and nose with my handkerchief.
And let out a heavy cough. Suddenly, the loud, chaotic bang of firecrackers explodes, but not beneath my feet. Instead, they are accompanied by a blood-curdling shriek from Liu Ruan.
In front of everyone,
A string of burning red firecrackers somehow flies right under Liu Ruan's pomegranate skirt.
sparks instantly set her hem ablaze, leaving her utterly humiliated and in complete disarray.
Oh, my mother. May the ancestors protect us. How could mother be so disrespectful to cause such a shameful scene during the grand ceremony?
The clan elders' faces turn livid in an instant. Disturbing the ancestors during the ancestral rites is a massive taboo in the Shen family.
Shen Qinghe points at me, screaming in accusation that my cough was a signal to someone.
Shen Qinghe is absolutely furious.
Just as he's about to call the servant who set off the firecrackers to confront him, grandmother steps forward first.
Chushu, you claim Qinghe gave a signal? Grandmother speaks coldly, her steps heavy and deliberate. The servant to set off the firecrackers is kneeling on the ground, trembling with fear.
Master, a little beggar suddenly snuck in from outside. He snatched my fire striker and threw it around. It has nothing to do with the eldest miss.
This, of course, was all arranged beforehand by Qinluan.
现明月撕蜡出糗，还来靠自的 face。
Without a shred of evidence, how dare you slander your eldest sister in front of the entire clan? Have you not embarrassed us enough today?
Luria clutched her ruined, blistered face,
Sogging.
but she couldn't utter a single word. I won this round, clean and neat.
But grandmother is no ordinary woman. Once back in her room, grandmother dismissed everyone, leaving only me.
She sat upright in her grand armchair,
Her gaze sharp as a sword.
After a long silence, she finally spoke in a low voice. King, did you arrange for those little beggars outside the ancestral hall? My heart skipped a beat. Without a second thought, I pulled back my skirt and knelt straight down.
Raising my hands high above my head.
Grandmother, Wen was wrong.
I was wrong to use such underhanded tricks.
Even more wrong to disturb the ancestors of the Shen family.
Grandmother let out a soft sigh.
The rattan whip landed gently in my palm. It didn't hurt, but it felt like a knife twisting in my heart.
Your nature is too unyielding, and it will easily snap. The waters in Jingling run deep. It seems I must find someone to temper your stubborn nature. Grandmother brought up Lin Jingyu, the legitimate son of the Minister Lin family, saying she wanted us to meet. But before I could even think of an excuse to decline,
A summons from the imperial palace arrived.
the Empress wished to summon me to the palace.
And Pai Diwen will be there too. On the carriage to the palace, I held a box of exquisite pastries that grandmother had specially prepared for me. I pinched a piece and stuffed it straight into the mouth of Qinglin beside me, and fed all the rest to the fish in the canal along the road. By time to reach the imperial garden,
The food box was filled with the cheapest, roughest grain cakes I had bought by the roadside, so dry they'd scratch your throat.
Pi Yan was standing under a tree, clad in a dark silk robe that accentuated his tall, upright figure, though it couldn't hide the dark hostility between his brows.
Shen Qinghe, since you came here today to apologize to me on your own accord, I can overlook the fact that you abandoned me to save your own skin.
I slowly opened the food box and took out a piece of the dry, rough grain cake. With a sharp snap, I broke it into pieces, scattering them across the stone tiles at my feet, attracting a few birds to fight over them.
Pi Jinwen freezes mid-sentence.
His outstretched hand clenches into an awkward fist. You've got it all wrong, Your Highness. I'm not here to apologize. I only used to cling to you to keep Her Majesty the Empress happy. But now, I'm not wasting another second on you. What did you just say? I said, Pei Jingwen. I don't love you anymore. I enunciate every single word. I watch his arrogant, self-righteous face twist in shock. I turn on my heel and walk away, only to find Pei Soing standing right behind the nearby rock garden.
He's clutching a blood-stained dagger in his hand.
The way he looks at me, it's like he's watching a demon finally rip off its disguise.
You better remember what you said today.
Don't you dare come back begging me on your knees later. I completely tune out his pathetic barking.
Rounding the rock garden,
I almost crashed straight into a cold, hard chest.
It's Pei Xihing.
He's dressed in a dark, gold-threaded robe embroidered with tiger patterns. Tall, striking, and imposing.
Quite different from his casual demeanor back in the carriage.
Today, he's like a sharp, unsheathed blade.
Cold and dangerously sharp.
You're quite the actress, Miss Shen.
Were those words meant for him?
Or were you trying to convince yourself? Arava bells instantly go off in my head. Pisihin spent 10 years at the northern border. He is far more ruthless and calculating than Pei Jingya. Every single word was the absolute truth. But I didn't realize the Ninth Highness enjoyed eavesdropping. Perhaps you'd like to bear witness to my resolve?
Is everyone in the Shen family as insanely reckless as you? My name is Shen Qinghe. Half of my life was already dragged through the mud a long time ago.
Pising falls silent for a brief moment.
Suddenly, he pulls a small porcelain bottle from his robes and tosses it to me.
It's premium wound healing ointment. Since you're turning over a new leaf, Miss Shen, you'd better take good care of that face of yours. With that, he brushes past me.
Shen Qinghe, if you truly don't want the title of Crown Princess,
I have plenty of ways to make sure you get your wish.
When I return to the manor, I find Shen Qinghe in the garden, suddenly practicing her embroidery with intense focus. She even went out of her way to have someone craft an incredibly exquisite phoenix kite. Right then, I knew the kite festival, the very event where she stole the spotlight in our past life, was about to begin again.
To make a stunning impression at the competition, Shen Qinghe spent day and night embroidering gold thread onto that phoenix kite.
She honestly thought that in this life, she could do exactly what she did in the last, using this kite to dazzle Pei Jingwen and climb her way to the top.
When we arrived at Mulan Lake,
the noble young ladies were gathered along both sides of the stream, making a lively scene.
Shen Qinghe, acting like a peacock showing off its feathers, couldn't wait to run off and brag about her powerful connections.
I gave Qinglong a quick nod. Taking advantage of the chaos, he slipped into her carriage and stole the chest containing the kite. When we opened it, the kite was indeed a masterpiece.
Every single golden feather practically screamed her greedy ambition. Such a beautiful thing. Wouldn't it be a shame to tear it to pieces?
A cold, deep voice suddenly echoed from behind me.
Startled, I whipped around, only to see Pei Sihao again.
You're right. It isn't mine. Without a single shred of remorse, right before his eyes,
I tore the kite into shreds with my own hands
and stomped on it viciously.
Your Highness, now that you've seen how wicked I am,
did you regret saving me in the woods? Lady Shen, you are so delightfully candid.
How could anyone possibly not adore you?
Came on. Pack up the remains and put them right back where they belong. When the competition officially began, Shen Qinghe, bathed in the crowd's fawning praise, elegantly opened the chest.
But the moment she saw the pile of shredded trash inside,
the smug smile on her face instantly shattered. What she did next, though, caught even me completely off guard. Clutching the pile of torn paper, Qinghe burst into a pitiful, tearful sob and pointed right at me, screaming, "Shen Qinghe!
It was you! It had to be you!"
Instantly, all eyes turned to me, filled with disgust and judgment. Shen Qinghe, how could you be so utterly vulgar and classless? How dare you destroy Qinghe's kite? Exactly. You're nothing but a bitter, jealous snake. They couldn't stand seeing Qinghe steal the spotlight. I casually brushed the bits of grass off my skirt and strolled over to them, completely unbothered. I sneered. Which of your eyes actually saw me lay a hand on her?
They were completely intimidated by my presence and actually fell dead silent for a moment.
You bunch of ugly hags.
With foul mouths and nothing but drama. Your brains are stupider than pigs, and you don't have an ounce of talent.
Well, that completely stirred up a hornet's nest. A few young ladies, who usually prided themselves on being elegant, turned red with rage. Throwing all ladylike behavior out the window, they lunged forward, trying to tear my hair out.
Oh, I wasn't about to be polite either.
I grabbed their leader and went to town, clawing and fighting back wildly. An entire place dissolved into absolute chaos. The high-pitched screams of the women quickly drew the attention of the male guests across the stream.
Stop it! Pei Jingwen barked, storming over with a dark, furious expression. His voice was cold enough to freeze water.
Shen Qinghe, you have utterly disgraced the Shen family.
He stepped right past the chaotic mess on the ground
and grabbed my wrist with an iron grip. He squeezed so hard it felt like he was going to crush my bones. His eyes were filled with nothing but pure disgust.
I snapped back that I'd rather get intimate with the boy next door,
which made his face twist in anger on the spot. But later, when I walked deep into the woods to wash my wounds in private, Zhang suddenly appeared from behind a tree,
holding a bottle of incredibly valuable ointment in his hand.
Peace Hen, why haven't you left yet? I winced, enduring the stinging pain on the back of my hand,
and asked him rather bluntly. He didn't say a word,
just quietly looking at me. I just wanted to see if Miss Shen really needed my...
Think, but who knew you were so fierce?
Even fighting a whole crowd on your own, you didn't lose an inch of ground. I took the porcelain bottle from him, our fingertips brushing
and his skin felt cool.
My heart inexplicably skipped a beat.
You don't think my behavior was scandalous? The people in the capital are the most hypocritical of all.
Honestly, watching you beat them up was actually quite satisfying.
Just as we were speaking,
Pijingnuan actually tracked us down, following the sound of our voices.
seeing the two of us alone, his handsome face instantly darkened, like a thundercloud.
Phew.
Why are you mingling with a vile woman like her?
I was just about to snap back,
But Pei Xing suddenly bowed.
I accidentally stepped on Miss Shen's skirt and was just apologizing. Pete Yuan glared at us suspiciously for a long moment, but ultimately found no flaws. With a cold snort, he dragged Pei Xing away. Before leaving, Pei Xing cast a backward glance at me. In his eyes, there was a warning, but also a promise. When I returned to the manor, I expected Shen Qinghe to be crying to father about my crimes.
But instead, I found grandmother sitting in the front hall.
She held a cane in her hand, her face dark and sullen. And to my surprise, Lin Jingyu, the young master from next door, was already there. Grandmama was truly furious this time. Even though she had protected me in front of my parents, scolding Lu Ria and her daughter until they couldn't even lift their heads, and even grounding Shen Qinghe once again.
Aru, the boy from next door has entered the city.
You must go pick him up tonight. Grandmother's tone broke to no argument. Unable to refuse, I had no choice but to take Qingluan and rush toward the city gates. Outside the gates, a young man in plain robes, with a clean, refreshing air, was slowly walking over, leading his horse. He was indeed handsome, with a gentle, scholarly air about him.
Cousin Shen, there is something I must say frankly.
Please speak, Brother Lin.
I am already aware that the Marquis Mansion wishes to arrange a marriage between us.
But I already have someone in my heart. Though she comes from a poor family and is a mute, she is the only one I will marry in this lifetime. I almost laughed out loud.
This was truly the best news I had heard since returning to this miserable life.
Before I could even reassure him that I would persuade grandmother, a sharp, sudden whistle echoed from the dark alley behind us. Pi Xing appeared silently at the edge of the firelight. Standing right beside him were several burly men dressed in tribal clothing. Ling Yinyu shrank back in terror.
But with a single glance, I recognized their identities. They were barbarians from the northern border.
Why on earth was Pei Xing meeting with northern barbarians in the dead of night? Was he colluding with the enemy? Or was he making final preparations for the tragedy I saw in my dream? Sensing the tension, Lin Jingyu tactfully slipped away first. Pi Xing, meanwhile, walked casually over to me, completely unfazed.
He was twirling a dart in his hand, one that bore the tribal totem of the northern barbarians.
So, you caught me. Are you insane? Those men are assassins. I hissed in a hushed whisper, my fingers trembling beneath my sleeves. He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly reached out and gripped my shoulders, forcing me to look him in the eyes. Shen Qinghe, when you had that dream, did you ever stop to think? The imperial court has lived in comfort for 10 years. They let their guard down against the barbarians ages ago. If I don't seek them out, who else is going to sound the alarm for this dead, decaying city of Jinling? I suddenly snapped out of my daze, a sudden realization hitting me. So, it was you? You let the assassins through the southern gate? He didn't deny it. Instead, he simply gazed toward the north, his eyes dark and fathomable. I once swore I would never return to the northern border. But on this land, there is still someone I must protect at all costs. Before I could demand to know who that person was, a sudden blaze erupted in the distance, lighting up the sky. The shrill alarm, whistles of the Imperial Guards instantly echoed through the entire city of Jinling.
Paging Yunlan, carrying an unprecedented air of dejection.
Think hallowly outside the Shem residence until late into the night. He had expected me to be overjoyed by his arrival, just as I always used to be. He never imagined that what he'd see instead was the sight of me walking back, side by side with Pei Xing. Shen Qinghe, you would rather choose a disgraced traitor
Then choose me?
Pijingwan's eyes turned bloodshot
As he violently smashed the jeweled ornaments he bought for me onto the ground.
The shimmering pearls shattered, scattering everywhere, reflecting only fractured shards of light. I stared coldly at the expensive ruins, and my heart didn't even stir with a single ripple of emotion.
Didn't stir even a single ripple in my heart.
In my past life, for the sake of these superficial favors, I cheapened myself my entire life, only to end up being abandoned by him when our kingdom fell. You exaggerate, Your Highness.
I simply do not wish to waste any more of my time. Unbeknownst to us, Shen Qinghe had been hiding behind the door.
Seeing this, she actually came out with a plate of sliced watermelon, trying to curry favor, attempting to recreate her flirtatious schemes from our past life. But in this life, my cold distance seemed to have completely thrown Pei Jingwan off balance. He cast a disgusted look at Shen Qinghe and snapped. The Shen family only has one legitimate granddaughter. Who do you think you are?
Shen Qinghe froze right where she stood. The watermelon in her hands trembled and fell to the ground. The sheer humiliation on her face wasn't even 1/10,000,000th of what I suffered in my past life.
Pi Jingyan stormed off in a rage, leaving a complete mess behind.
Once Pei Jingwan was gone, I stepped into my grandmother's room. She was staring at a military report with a deep frown. The barbarian assassins infiltrating Jinling are merely a decoy. I fear Yanmen Pass in the north is about to face a major catastrophe. My grandmother, Lady Shen, was once a female Marquesas, officially titled by the late emperor. She pulled me close, pointing at the treacherous pass on the map. The court has lived in comfort for too long.
If those few assassins are merely the vanguard,
then the real fatal blow will surely fall on Yanmen Pass. As for Pei Qinghe, that ninth prince spent 10 years at the northern border. He understands the situation at Yanmen Pass better than anyone.
he lured the assassins into the capital, just to force the emperor to open his eyes with brutal, bloody facts.
However, the news brought by my father Shen Qinghe sent the temperature plunging to freezing point.
Although the emperor has tightened security,
He remains hesitant about choosing a commander. Not a single one of those useless parasites in court has dared to volunteer to guard that bitterly cold wasteland. Vivid images of the massacre at Yanmen and the endless suffering from my past life kept flashing through my mind.
if no one goes.
The tragedy will inevitably repeat itself.
Just then, Miss, Prince Pei Qinghe is currently surrounded by the imperial guards outside the southern city.
To warn the imperial court, Pei Qinghe ultimately crossed the ultimate line of imperial power. In the dense forest, when I went to save him, he was also covered in blood.
He looked at me and whispered, "They said I'd end up dying here."
Shen Qinghe.
Can you cry for me? Just one more time. By the time I rushed to the southern outskirts of the city,
The sickening stench of blood already filled the air. Pei Qinghe was leaning against a withered tree, his dark armored blade still dripping with fresh blood.
all around him, several masked assassins lay dead on the ground. The imperial guards arrived right after.
Pi Jingyan rode at the very front of the pack.
Looking down at Pei Qinghe as if he were already a condemned prisoner.
Young.
Secretly letting the barbarians into the city is high treason. What else do you have to say for yourself? I'm using the severed heads of these assassins to remind your highness
That the northern border is already in dire peril.
if your highness only cares about how to convict me, then the day Yanmen Pass falls will be the day Jinlin is humiliated. Stop! Can't your highness see that these assassins weren't trying to kill the ninth prince?
They wanted to destroy the tactical defense maps Yuan Bass.
They fear Pei Qinghe, and they fear a vigilant great Qi even more.
Watching me shield Pei Qinghe.
Pei Jingwan gripped his horse's reins so hard his knuckles turned white.
Just as the standoff grew tense, an empress's royal procession suddenly appeared at the edge of the woods.
The empress took everyone away,
announcing she would try the case herself during her birthday banquet. I knew this was a dangerous game of chess.
On the day of the banquet,
I put on the soft armor my grandmother had given me years ago, hiding it beneath my elegant gown, because I knew Pei Jingwan would never let Pei Qinghe hang off easily.
the empress's birthday banquet was extraordinarily lavish.
Every noble family in Jinling of the second rank and above was present. Splendid silk and exquisite delicacies were everywhere,
Accompanied by waves of laughter and joy.
but as I sat among the guests, I could feel the hostile, malicious whispers buzzing all around me. They called me a wicked woman, claiming I mistreated my stepmother, and accusing me of having a scandalous affair with the traitor Pei Qinghe. I simply lowered my eyes and took a sip of my tea.
But in my mind, I was quietly counting down the minutes.
Pi Shuhem had been granted a special dispensation to attend.
But he was relegated to the darkest, most isolated corner. Trained in jet black, he looked completely out of place amidst all this golden opulence.
Meanwhile, Pei Jingwan kept casting dark, ruthless glares in my direction. There was a crazed, predatory obsession in his eyes. As the alcohol flowed and the night wore on, Pei Jingwan excused himself, claiming he had too much to drink. Moments later, a young eunuch slipped over to whisper that the crown prince was waiting for me in the rear garden to discuss urgent military matters regarding the northern frontier. I scoffed inwardly.
Pei Jingwan, after everything, is this really the only cheap trick you have left?
I followed the eunuch deep into the shadows of the rock gardens, and sure enough, there stood Pei Jingwan, his face twisted in a dark scowl.
He lunged forward suddenly, clomping a vice-like grip around my wrist.
Shen Qinghe, do you really think protecting that dog will help you escape me? I will beg my imperial father to decree our marriage tonight. I'll make you realize, once and for all,
Who truly rules this empire? His distorted face loomed closer and closer, the suffocating stench of alcohol on his breath making my stomach churn. The terror of my past life collided with the sheer disgust of my present one. My hand slipped backward, finding the sharp hairpin hidden deep inside my sleeve, just as I braced myself to fight him to the death. Your Highness, I believe it's time you sobered up. Pacey Singh's fingers tightened slightly, sending a wave of sheer terror through the eunuch standing behind Pei Jingwan. He opened his mouth but one freezing, razor-sharp glare from Pei Siheng froze him dead in his tracks. Pei Siheng, how dare you lay your hands on me? Pei Xing let out a cold, mocking sneer and shocked Pei Jingwan aside like a worthless piece of trash. In a swift motion, he stripped off his own outer robe and wrapped it tightly around my disheveled body. Your humble brother wouldn't dare, Pei Siheng said flatly. But your Highness is so thoroughly intoxicated that you are losing all sense of royal decorum. The princess consort has been deeply shaken. I will take her back to Her Majesty the Empress immediately to report our return. Pei Siheng, you're the spawn of a disgraced sinner. What right do you have to compete with me? You struck him, I whispered. Are you not afraid the Emperor will truly punish you for this? Shen Qinghe. If I told you that my march to the northern frontier was solely to secure a peaceful Jinling for you, would you believe me? His voice was so profoundly solemn that it left me completely breathless and dazed for a moment. True, pure devotion that I had begged for, but could never obtain in my past life, was being laid bare before me in this life, in the most devastating and heart-wrenching way possible. The very next day, the Emperor's imperial decree swept through the entire city of Jinling. For offending his superiors, the 9th Prince Pei Shiheng was sentenced to 20 lashes of the cane and banished from the capital. He was ordered to leave immediately for Yemen Pass in the north to redeem himself through military service. By the time I heard the news, he was already in a carriage, heading north. When the news of Pei Siheng's banishment reached the Shen residence, I was in the back garden, helping my grandmother prune the withered branches. Those 20 lashes were brutal. I heard they had to carry him onto the carriage. I tried to pull myself together, but Pei Siheng went there to redeem himself through service. And Yemen Pass is a bitterly cold, harsh wasteland. Whether he survives to return is entirely up to fate. I pressed my lips together and said nothing, but my chest throbbed with a suffocating pain. Pei Sing only ended up like this because he saved me. His parting words, "To make Jinling peaceful for you," still echo in my ears. I went back to my room, packed some premium medicine for wounds and warm clothes, and rushed to the north gate under the cover of night. The convoy was already packed and ready to go. Pei Sing was lying face down on a crude stretcher, his face as pale as paper. Only his eyes remained sharp under the torchlight. He struggled, trying to sit up, but it only tore at his wounds, making him let out a painful groan. They said you're going to Yemen. Is it true?
Go back to Jining, Shen Qinghe.
Though that place is hypocritical, it is still better than this sand-swept border. If you die, who will pay me back this favor?
BCK.
You have to live. Leave and write to me. As Pei Xing's carriage vanished into the endless night, my heart felt half empty. I thought I would have a few peaceful days, but Shang Chuchu came up with yet another wicked scheme. Crying, she held Shen Mingwan's hand and said she wanted to pray for me at Fawa Temple, south of Dinling. But in reality, she was preparing a grand gift for me. Nothing good ever comes from Shen Chuju's kindness. She didn't just drag my father, Shen Mingyuan, along. She even managed to get an imperial decree from the Empress herself, forcing me to accompany her to Feihua Temple for 7 days of spiritual retreat. Grandmother wanted to step in and stop it, but with the Empress's word given, the Shen family had no choice but to obey. Feihua Temple was built right against the mountain, with a sheer cliff at the very back. The scenery was breathtaking, but utterly desolate. Sister, these few days of spiritual retreat should do wonders to wash away that violent streak of yours. I watched her pathetic performance with cold indifference. After evening prayers, a faint rustle of footsteps suddenly echoed in the secluded courtyard. Before Qingluan could even scream for help, a red cloth was shoved over her nose and mouth, and she collapsed, limp to the ground. I bolted upright. Miss Shen, someone paid a fortune for your head, and they want us to ruin your virtue while we're at it. In an instant, everything clicked. This was Shen Chuchu and Du Rian's ultimate death trap. They wanted to ruin my virtue in a sacred temple, completely destroying any chance of me ever marrying the crown prince. That split second between life and death, I noticed a familiar command token hanging from the brute's waist. It was the emblem of the crown prince's personal guard.
批金语，豪客一必所好色，豪这个太驾，开靠麻鸡给长问。
I was cornered right against the window, with the bottomless abyss gaping right behind me. Just as I braced myself to leap off the cliff to take them down with me, a deadly projectile sliced through the air, and a dark figure swept down from the rooftop. The familiar scent of pine made my heart skip a beat. But it wasn't Pei Siheng. It was Wu Xiaojiang,
the shadow guard Pei Siheng had left behind to protect me before he departed.
His strikes were lightning fast.
Every single blow aiming straight for the kill. Within mere moments, the brutes lay dead on the floor. Master's orders to protect the princess consort with my life.
陆校长徐德是大过。
Dropped to one knee and spoke in a cold, steady voice. I finally let out a ragged breath, my knees buckling as I collapsed into a chair. Clean this up. Since he wants to play dirty, then we'll put on a good show for him. The very next morning,
All hell broke loose at Faihua Temple.
Shen Qinghe had originally planned to bring a crowd of temple-goers to catch me in the act,
but when she pushed open the door, the two tugs she had hired herself would lie half-naked on her own bed. Ah! Shen Qinghe's blood-curdling shriek echoed through the entire ancient temple. When Shen Qinghe arrived, his face was red with rage. He slapped Shen Qinghe across the face right then and there. Liu Rian tried to defend her, but I shut her up completely with the knockout incense my people found. Father, perhaps Sister Qinghe was just too lonely to have done something so scandalous. This farce completely ruined Shen Qinghe's reputation in Jinlin. The Shen family had no choice but to drag her back to the manor and put her under strict house arrest. Spring was in full bloom in Jinling, but then I received a blood-stained letter from the northern border. It bore only 4 words written in blood. Yan Men in critical danger. At the same time, PG Wen suddenly fell gravely ill in the palace. The emperor issued a decree, summoning me to the palace, claiming he wanted me to tend to the sick crown prince.
Shen Qinghe.
You came after all. I heard that Sea King is surrounded by barbarians at Amen. Just one word from me. The reinforcements can set out immediately. My heart skipped a beat. So, he was using Pei Siheng's life to threaten me. In my past life, he abandoned me for the sake of his empire. In this life, he wants my submission in exchange for Pei Siheng's safety. What is it that your highness wants? Marry me. Become my consort. The moment you agree, I will immediately order Pei Siheng to return to the capital to receive his rewards. I scoffed inwardly. A consort? Just so I can wither and die in this cold eastern palace, just like Shen Qinghe did in our past life? Your Highness has miscalculated. Even if Pei Sim dies fighting at Yemen Pass, his death would be 100 times more honorable than groveling for survival here in Jinling. And as a granddaughter of the Shen family, I will never enter the Eastern Palace as a concubine. You're insane, Shen Qinghe. You are absolutely out of your mind. As I walked out of the Eastern Palace, I saw my grandmother, wearing her crimson war robe. The imperial court has decided to move south. The emperor is abandoning Beijing, abandoning the soldiers who are still fighting to the death. I clenched my fists and made a decision that shocked the entire Shen family. I was going to ride to Beijing alone. You are not allowed to go. Shen Qinghe, you're just a weak woman. What can you possibly do in Beijing other than throw your life away? You can do absolutely nothing. You know, grandmother, Pei Siheng is in Beijing to protect our homeland. The court can abandon him. The Shen family can abandon him. But I cannot! My grandmother, the matriarch of the Shen family, stared at me. In her cloudy, aging eyes, a trace of the fierce, iron-blooded spirit of her youth actually surfaced. The people of our Shen family can die. But we must never flee. Go! If Yamen Pass falls, then die by his side. I will stay in Zhenling to guard the soul of the Shen family for you. Along the way, I saw crowds of refugees fleeing south, but I was riding against the tide, charging straight toward the place where the stench of blood was thickest. By the time I reached Yemen Pass, the entire fortress had been dyed a dark, bloody red by the setting sun. Below the city walls lay piles upon piles of corpses. The black banners of the Manchu army whipped wildly in the wind. Open the gates! It's me, Shen Qinghe! I screamed desperately at the tightly closed gates. With a bone-chilling screech, the heavy city gates slowly ground open. Pei Siheng, covered in blood, came galloping forward on his horse. When he saw me, shock filled his eyes first, followed by a heartbreak so deep it burned my soul. Why didn't you run? The enemy's war horns blew once more. At the edge of the plains, thousands upon thousands of enemy troops bared their savage fangs. This battle was a fight to the death. A rain of arrows, thick as locusts, blotted out the sun. The air over Yanmen Pass was thick with the suffocating stench of blood and iron. Dark, dried blood stained Pei Siheng's breastplate. He gripped my wrist tightly. Shen Qinghe,
The carriages heading south from Jinling have already departed.
Why did you come here now? Do you want to make my lifelong protection over you all for nothing? His eyes were bloodshot,
And his voice was terribly hoarse.
braving the howling, freezing wind. I looked out at the dense, sprawling barbarian camps in the distance.
Peace, the imperial court may have abandoned Yemen Pass.
But the pride and integrity of our Shen family remains. Rather than lingering on in disgrace on the road south,
I would rather stay here and stand with you until the very end.
he froze. His eyes, once filled with cold fury, trembled slightly before finally dissolving into a heavy sigh. That night, we sat side by side in the corner of the watchtower, watching the scattered glimmers of firelight beyond the pass. Inside the city, our food and supplies were completely depleted. The soldiers leaned against the base of the walls in small groups, their breathing so faint it was barely audible.
Pising wrapped his pitch-black cloak tightly around me. His embrace still carried that cold, crisp scent of pine.
But now, it was laced with the grim resolve of facing death. Ooh, if the city falls tomorrow, I will end your life myself. I will never let those barbarians humiliate you. Not even a little.
He kissed my forehead,
His voice incredibly calm. At dawn the next day, the shrill, terrifying war horns of the barbarians echoed through the swirling desert sands. Just as Pesihing raised his broken sword, ready to lead his men into a suicidal charge, a mysterious army of silver-armored riders suddenly appeared on the horizon behind the pass.
the long spear held by their leader.
Was none other than my grandmother's legendary weapon, which had been missing for years. The spear gleamed with a freezing light under the morning sun, just as it had struck terror into the hearts of the barbarians 30 years ago. From high up on the watchtower, I watched as this mysterious silver-armored army, like a bolt of silver lightning, slammed brutally into the barbarian encirclement. That is the Shen family's banner.
My voice trembled.
As I stared in disbelief at the massive gold-border white flag whipping wildly in the wind.
Pising was equally struck with shock. Ignoring his severe injuries,
He threw himself off his horse. I desperately screamed down to the soldiers below. "Open the gates! Open the gates!"
all troops, follow me out of the city to face the enemy.
The moment the heavy gates creaked open, I saw the general in white leading the charge. Snowy white hair was tucked tightly beneath the helmet,
And that wrinkled yet fiercely heroic face
belonged to none other than my grandmother, old Madame Shen, who should have been living out her peaceful final years in Jingling. She had actually given away her entire fortune, secretly rallying her former officers and the Shen family's private army, fighting her way all the way from Jimling to this bitterly cold northern border.
Chai Jiao, your grandmother isn't dead yet. Who dares lay a finger on a child of the Shen family?
With a fierce thrust of her spear, grandmother decapitated the enemy vanguard's leader in a single blow. Warm blood splattered across her silver armor, looming like angry crimson plum blossoms.
Throwing all rules and decorum to the wind, I stumbled and scrabbled down the watchtower.
The battle raged on, turning the very heavens dark. Wherever the Shen family's silver armor army charged, the enemy fell like wheat, their cries of agony filling the air. The legendary long-lost aura of the god of war once again enveloped the skies of Yanmen Pass. The enemy retreated hundreds of miles away. Yanmen Pass was saved. But the moment grandmother dismounted, she spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed straight into my arms. Her calloused hands tightly gripped my collar, and she whispered something in my ear that chilled me to my very core. "Jiayao, grandmother saw you jump from the city wall with her own eyes." My heart, it nearly broke into pieces. Grandmother's voice was as faint as a dying ember, yet it set off a raging tempest in my mind. I stood there, utterly frozen, my blood running cold. I couldn't even find the voice to call for a doctor.
In my past life, I took my own life in bitter despair.
I thought no one would ever know. But I never knew that my white-haired grandmother had knelt and pleaded before the gods for 10 long years, sacrificing the blessings of her next 10 lifetimes, just to buy me this absurd yet precious rebirth.
Bishikal knelt by grandmother's bedside.
His eyes red as he promised to protect me for the rest of his life. Although he didn't know the secret of my rebirth, he swore his most solemn oath upon his royal honor as grandmother drew her final breaths. Half a month later, the emperor moved the capital back to Jinling. An imperial decree was rushed to Yanmen Pass. For his bravery in defending the pass, Pesihing's crimes were pardoned, and he was officially crowned the king of Yan to guard the northern border forever. But the Shen family would never again have that formidable female marmess who once shook the world. Grandmother was laid to rest at Yanmen Pass. She said her husband was buried there. Whose? And that when the spring grass grew endless, she wanted to watch over the peace of the northern border with her own eyes.
By the time Shen Mingan washed over with Tinglan,
He had aged so drastically, he was barely recognizable. To climb her way into power, Shen Qinghe became a lowly concubine to the prince's heir. Now, ruthlessly tormented by the main consort, her life in the mansion is a living hell. Lu Ruan, too, went completely mad in that small courtyard of the Shen estate. All those who ruined my past life have finally, in this life,
reaped what they sowed. But as I stood before grandmother's grave, clutching that rusted family ruler in my hand, I'd only felt a hollow, aching emptiness in my chest. On the day Pei Qinghe officially established his estate and received his seal of office, I unexpectedly received a grand gift sent by Pei Jingwen. It was the Empress's imperial seal and sash he had once promised to Shen Qinghe when he ascended the throne in my past life. In his letter, he wrote that he, too, was leaving to travel the world
To see this prosperous era on behalf of that Shen Qinghe, who died alone in the snow.
The heavy insignia sent by Pei Jingwen rested weightily in its brocade box.
It red tassels hanging over the edge of the table, painfully glaring.
When Pei Qinghe walked in,
His eyes still held a trace of a cold, lethal aura that had barely faded.
he certainly knows how to be spiteful, scenting these dusty relics of the past right before he leaves.
Ah, Wu, if you like that sort of thing,
I will go and have a princess consort seal made for you. One that is 1,000 times better than this.
I shook my head, stood up, and pushed the box into a hidden compartment. It is nothing more than the lingering obsession of someone who couldn't get what he wanted. Let him be.
Pei Qinghe has withdrawn, taking with him the shameful secrets of the Shen family and Shen Qinghe's shattered dreams.
He vanished at the end of the capital's long street. I heard that before he left. He sat outside the gates of the Shen estate, weeping all through the night. But he never received even a single glance from Shen Qinghe. Spring has finally arrived in the northern border.
Beyond the pass, the grass grows greener and more lush with each passing day.
The people have migrated back, and the markets are once again alive with the chatter and laughter of foreign merchants. I became pregnant. On the day he heard the news,
Pei Qinghe pushed aside all of his military duties just to sit clumsily under the veranda, sewing our child's very first tiny garment.
That was supposed to be my grandmother's duty.
But now, it had fallen into the hands of the Prince of Yan, the most feared man in the land.
my father, Mingwan, chose to stay behind at Anmen Pass. He never mentioned returning to the capital again. Instead, he spent his days seeking peace in the manor, keeping me company, while I carried my child. He once failed my mother, and he used to misunderstand me. But now, in the burning liquor of the borderlands,
It seemed he had finally found a sliver of redemption.
those peaceful days passed all too quickly. On the very night before his great-grandchild was to be born, the traveling doctor, carrying a medicine basket, suddenly appeared at the northern pass. He claimed he could heal the years of old battle wounds plaguing Pei Qinghe.
Yet, when we were alone, he whispered to me, "Princess, do you still remember the 10-year pact made under the Lord of Heaven?" The gold needle in his hand gleamed with an eerie light under the candle flame,
And his eyes were so deep, they looked as if they held the cold mist of the underworld. I dismissed everyone and demanded, "Who on earth are you? My grandmother is already gone. That 10-year pact was settled long ago. Old Madam Shen traded 10 lifetimes of blessings for your rebirth," he said. "But the Lord of Heaven never said your rebirth would come without a price."
Leaving behind a torn prescription, he vanished into thin air.
By the time Pei Qinghe woke up,
I was staring blankly at that piece of paper.
he wrapped his arms around me from behind.
Whoa, don't listen to those crazy words. If grandmother were still here, she would definitely whip him with her ring. He kissed my cheek, his tone unbelievably tender.
Life went on, tranquil as ever. Sometimes, I would gaze out at the endless green mountains of the northern border,
Imagining I could see my grandmother, clad in silver armor, sitting on the watchtower, looking down at us with both love and sternness. In this lifetime, there was no fallen city, no ruined family, and no taking one's own life in bitter resentment.
Outside Yemen Pass, the spring grass stretched on endlessly.
That was the final blessing my grandmother left us.
Down at the city gates, Shen Qinghe was no longer that fragile, innocent girl.
Why do you get to be the glamorous princess of the northern border? Will I have to suffer endless torment in that cold, desolate manor? She shrieked, tearing her throat raw. Behind her, the pursuing soldiers began to batter frantically at the gates of Yuzhou. Lingjing went up to the city walls himself to command the battle.
While I was shielded, deep inside the safest corner of the manor,
Kulun stood guard at the door, refusing to budge an inch. He clutched the dagger I gave him, tightly in his hand. "Don't be afraid, my lady. His Highness must be on his way." I could feel the contractions, getting stronger and stronger. It was as if this baby was desperate to be born on this chaotic night. The screams and battle cries outside the city, and the sound of the doors being battered, along with Xie Zhaochu's piercing hysterical laughter, echoing through the courtyard walls. At the exact moment the gates of Juzhou were breached, a sudden rush of thundering hoofbeats erupted from behind.
What was it? Pei Qinghe.
his main force should still be on the outskirts of Jinling.
Then, who could it be? Enduring the agonizing pain, I forced myself to sit up and saw a dark figure leap down from the courtyard wall. A cold glint from his sword flashed under the moonlight.
Shen Qinghe's piercing shriek cut off instantly.
The dark figure pushed open the door, carrying Shen Qinghe's severed head. He was drenched in blood. He took off his helmet, revealing a face that was both familiar and yet so strange. Pei Jingyuan. It was actually him, the man who was supposed to be in Jinling. He was covered in stubble, and the arrogance that wants to find him was completely gone from his eyes.
Now there was only a desperate, near insane regret. It turned out that during his days of self-confinement in the East Palace, he hadn't just dreamed of his own cruelty in our past life.
He had also dreamed of what happened after I threw myself off the city walls, of how he, consumed by loneliness, let his empire crumble into ruin,
Only to die alone in a raging blizzard.
That dream was real.
Wasn't it? I looked at him coldly, fighting through the agonizing pain of labor.
毕竟有完. Do you really think that killing Qinghe
And bringing men to save me can ever pay back the life you owed me from our past? He let out a self-deprecating laugh. He pulled the blood-stained tiger tally from his robes and placed it on the table. The Jingling Imperial Guard only answers to this tally. I am giving it to you.
That Pei Qinghe can take the capital without spilling a single drop of blood.
Shen Qinghe. Even if I gave up all the blessings of this lifetime, I know I could never earn back a single look from you.
But I still want you to live.
Finally, I understood.
The voice I heard when I was reborn. It wasn't my grandmother's.
It was Pei Jingwen, repenting on his knees before the divine throne, trading everything to beg the heavens for a chance to let me start over.
Just as Pei Jingyan was about to stand up and leave,
Pei Qinghe's earth-shattering roar echoed from outside the courtyard.
He kicked the door open and burst into the room. Instantly, his eyes locked onto Pei Jingwen kneeling right before my bed. His eyes turned bloodshot in an instant.
Thinking Pei Jingwen was there to hurt me again.
The long sword in his hand drove straight through Pei Jingwen's chest. The sickening sound of steel piercing flesh echoed through the room.
皮筋就宛是把地煞得发亮。
Yet he didn't even try to dodge.
Pei Qinghe gripped the hilt with white knuckles, his eyes burning with fury.
This was his thunderous wrath. Born from riding day and night, exhausting 5 horses to death, the moment he heard of the Jingling coup.
Don't kill him, Sikin. This strike, I owed it to him, and to you.
The factions in Jingling,
I have already cleared them all out.
the road ahead. You two must walk it on your own.
Pei Jingwen collapsed into a pool of blood.
His vision slowly fading, as if he had finally found release from the nightmare that had bound them for 2 lifetimes.
Pei Qinghe didn't even care to check if he was dead or alive.
He threw out his sword and swept me into his arms.
Where is the midwife? Quick, call the midwife.
Instantly, the room descended into utter chaos. Kukulun rushed in with the physicians who had been waiting on standby. I could feel my consciousness slipping away, fading into darkness. If I don't make it through this time.
Don't talk like that.
I haven't even looked at our child yet. You haven't seen the peaceful world we fought for. I won't let you leave me. Just as I gathered my very last ounce of strength and let out a piercing scream, a sudden violent gale whipped up outside the room. Then, amidst the loud, clear cry of a newborn baby,
The dragon-headed staff left by old Madame Shen began to glow with the soft, pure light in the corner.
it was the loud, healthy cry of a baby boy, piercing right through the suffocating, deathly silence of the estate. Qinghe wept with sheer joy. Trembling, she brought the swaddled bundle to me. Miss, look, it's a little prince. He looks exactly like His Highness Prince Yan. I took a weak, exhausted look at the wrinkled, reddish little life, and the breath I had been holding in my throat finally slipped away in relief. Yet, Pei Qinghe didn't even spare a single glance for the baby. His eyes rimmed with red. He just kissed my forehead over and over again. A he.
Thank you. Thank you for still staying by my side.
In the end, Pei Jingwen didn't die from that sword strike. At the very last moment, Pei Qinghe had deliberately diverted the blade.
Pei Jingwen stayed in the manor.
Recovering from his wounds for half a month, afterward he left his elite forces behind and completely alone, rode off on a lean horse, disappearing into the vast twilight. He said he wanted to travel across this beautiful land
And see the bright, beautiful world of this lifetime on behalf of Shen Qinghe, who had died in the snow.
Back in Jinling, with the military tally left by Pei Jingwen and Pei Shiheng's swift, iron-fisted methods, the remaining rebel forces were quickly wiped out.
As for Ruyan, she took her own life in prison.
Before she died, she cursed with bitter resentment. As for Shen Mingwan, after learning the whole truth, he looked as if he had aged 10 years. He decided to resign from his official post and return to his hometown with the Shen family registry to pay respects to his ancestors. While I was still in postpartum confinement, I received a congratulatory gift from Lin Jingyu. It was a pair of little tiger head shoes, hand-sewn by his wife. At that time, Jilling was in the middle of bustling preparations for the new emperor's coronation.
Yet, at this crucial moment, Pei Qinghe declined all imperial favors, saying, "I am taking my wife and child back to the northern realm, and I will never step foot in the capital again."
The envoys from Jinling knelt all over the floor, begging the Prince of Yan to stay for the sake of the empire.
But Pei Qinghe nearly changed the baby swaddle with unhurried care.
"This land and its people," he said,
don't necessarily need someone named Pei to guard them.
I promised he that I would accompany her to see the endless spring of the Northern Realm. In the end, Pei Qinghe recommended a young man of noble virtue and talent to take over,
Well, he took only the title of the Prince of Yan, guardian of the state.
and led me and our child back to the Northern Realm with a grand procession.
On the day we arrived at the pass of the Northern Realm,
The entire city lined the streets to welcome us.
by the tombstone of my grandmother, old Madame Shen, a few lush green little cypress trees had sprouted.
Holding my child, I knelt before her grave.
Grandmother, look, I whispered.
Dijia has brought your great-grandson to see you.
In this life, we are all doing so well. Pising wrapped his arms around me and our baby, shielding us in his embrace. He was no longer that wrathful, bitter outcast of the past,
But a god of war who protected the peace of this entire region.
although the air of the Northern Realm was still bitterly cold. It no longer carried the despairing scent of death from my past life.
The days passed quietly, day by day.
Sting away. Though Shen Qinghe was dead.
But his tragic end became a cautionary tale in the capital.
Those sinister tricks seemed to be buried forever, along with the raging fire of that night. Our child learned to crawl.
And learned to call us Papa and Mama. Sometimes, I still think about that dream of rebirth.
And the 10 years of repentance I spent before the Divine Emperor. No matter who traded everything to give me this second chance.
I have finally found the peace I always wanted in this mortal world.
3 years later, a destitute traveling doctor appeared at the northern border pass. He carried a torn, incomplete medical prescription.
I'm demanding to see the princess consort of Yan by name.
The moment I saw him,
The scissors I was using to make clothes for my child fell to the ground with a clatter.
the man was someone who should have disappeared long ago. Though the traveling doctor was road-weary.
And his face was weathered by the elements.
Those sharp, brilliant eyes of his could not lie.
He took off his straw hat, revealing long, slightly curly hair. Unlike anyone from the Central Plains, he was actually an old acquaintance from Pei Siham's mother's clan.
Miss Sen, no. Princess consort, he whispered, lowering his voice.
He pulled a faded, yellowed scroll of parchment from his robe. This is the actual relic left behind by the late consort Yan. It has nothing to do with any witchcraft or sorcery. It is a military defense map of the northern border's mountains and rivers. She was framed, back then. All because of this life-saving map. My heart skipped a beat.
No wonder that witchcraft disaster dragged down so many lives back then.
If only we had gotten this map sooner, the northern border would never have fallen so quickly in my past life.
When Pei Siham heard the news and rushed over, the two of them spent the entire night in secret talks in the study.
Starting with that border pass, the next Pei Siham began reinforcing the pass, fixing the hidden weaknesses in the defense that outsiders could never spot. My mother wanted to protect this place until her dying breath. Yet I always thought she hated this land. Under our management, this land flourished more and more each day, and even the once fierce barbarians grew terrified of us, even starting to bring furs to the border pass to trade with us. My father, Shen Qinghe, would occasionally send us tea leaves he grew himself from our hometown. He mentioned in his letters that, although Shen Qinghe was still alive in the prince's estate, she had completely lost her mind.
Every single day, she does nothing but stare at the wall, crying out Pei Jingwan's name. Perhaps it is her rightful retribution.
As I sat under the veranda, teaching our child how to read, Pei Sing was practicing his swordplay in the courtyard.
The sunlight fell upon the snow, reflecting glints of shimmering light. But just as this peace felt absolute,
The imperial court suddenly dispatched a secret envoy. Her Highness Princess Yan had mysteriously vanished during her southern tour.
and all clues pointed to a desolate mountain in the northern border.
It was the very place where Pei Jingwan had died in his past life.
Could it be that, in the end, he still couldn't escape that curse?
Although Pei Xinhu resented the court's unwanted intrusion, this matter involved Pei Jingwan.
So he ultimately decided to head into the mountains himself. Guard the estate well, he told me.
I watched his retreating figure.
An inexplicable panic suddenly gripping my chest.
My eyelids twitched relentlessly.
The terrible omens.
My lady, His Highness is a master of martial arts. My maid consoled me.
And he is the lord of this northern border.
Nothing could possibly happen to him.
Yet I waited for 3 days and 3 nights without a single word.
It wasn't until the evening of the 4th day
That Pei King finally returned, carrying a grim, chilling aura. Behind him followed several guards carrying a stretcher.
the figure on the stretcher was covered with a white sheet. But judging by the outline of the body, it was indeed Pei Jingwan, who had been missing for so long.
I found him near a stagnant pool at the bottom of that cliff, Pei Sihung said.
When Pei Jingwan died,
He was still clutching a tattered handkerchief in his hand.
It was the very one I had carelessly left behind when I saved him in our past life.
He had traveled across rivers and mountains in this lifetime, only to end up right back where he started.
Choosing to die in the very place that brought him the deepest regret.
He saw me before he drew his last breath, and only said, "We are even." Pei One's death signaled that all the entanglements of our past life had finally vanished into thin air. Following his last wishes, we buried him at the foot of the mountain. There was no name on the tombstone, only the words, "A traveler returned home." When Shen Qinghe heard the news, he fell into a long silence, and later sent over a Buddhist sutra he had copied by hand. The spring breeze of the northern border, once again, turned the mountains green. Hand in hand with our child, Pei Qinghe and I walked along the very city walls that my grandmother, Old Lady Shen, had patrolled all those years ago. The melodious sound of a flute drifts in from afar. This lifetime's spring indeed feels beautifully endless. Many years later, a new guardian goddess emerged in the legends of the northern frontier. But hidden within Pei Qinghe's private journal was a shocking secret that he never even shared with me. A secret about the day of our rebirth. It turned out he had also heard that voice. Lately, Qinghe had been spending a lot of time alone in his study, staring lost in thought at an old dusty file. When I went in to bring him some warm soup, he instinctively closed the file, a flicker of unease flashing through his eyes. "My lord, are you keeping military secrets from me? Have you ever wondered why we, of all people, were the ones granted a second chance at life?" In truth, I had asked myself that same question over and over again. In my past life, after I plunged to my death, I endured a long, suffocating darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I was back by that muddy ditch. When I was fighting the barbarians on the northern frontier, I sustained a fatal wound. Well unconscious, I also heard a faint, ethereal voice, asking if I was willing to give up everything to protect a soul destined to perish. And I agreed. I never believed in gods or spirits, but the moment I returned to the capital and saw you standing beside the carriage, I knew. It was never a dream. Only then did I understand why the two of us, who barely crossed paths in our past lives, would be so deeply bound together in this one. It turns out, in a place unseen by me, he had also fought to save my life, paying a heavy price to some unspeakable power. Just then,
Qinghe rushed into the room.
shattering the silence of the study. "My lady! My lord!" An old man claiming to be an old acquaintance has arrived outside the city gates. He even brought an old keepsake that belonged to the late old madam.
Hagen accompanied me to the city gates.
There, a stooped old servant stood waiting, holding a heavily rusted long sword in his hands. The moment I got a clear look at that sword, my blood ran cold, and I felt as if I had plunged into an icy abyss.
Your Highness, this is
The dowry of the late old madam from all those years ago. This old servant has guarded it for 20 years.
and now it is finally returned to its rightful owner. That was the token of love my grandmother had buried with her husband. It should have been buried deep beneath the earth of Yemen. Calm down first. This sword, which should have slept eternally underground.
Why is it suddenly here? The old servant slowly turns around. It is actually the old servant who serves Ling Jingyu. He bows deeply to me. "Princess, my young master found this while patrolling the ancient battlefields, the outskirts of Yuzhou, recovering it from a collapsed ancient tomb." I take the longsword from his hands,
Feeling the rough, cold rust against my palm.
tears begin to stream down my face. Hang pulls me into his embrace, taking the sword from me, but his gaze suddenly turns incredibly sharp. A collapsed ancient tomb? There hasn't been any heavy rain in the outskirts of Yuzhou these past few years. Why on earth would a perfectly intact tomb just collapse? The old servant hesitates, looking unsure whether to speak.
Your Highness is truly wise.
It wasn't a natural disaster. Someone has been secretly digging it up. It seems they are searching for the legendary dragon vein. Or perhaps the half of the commander's seal that old Madame Shen took with her years ago. The commander's seal. That is the ultimate shield safeguarding the entire Great Qi dynasty. Even the emperor himself might not know its whereabouts. I suddenly recall my grandmother on her deathbed, pointing out the window and whispering, "Spring is endless." Could she have been talking about more than just the scenery? Was she actually guiding me to the hiding place of the commander's seal? Meanwhile, a strange, horrifying illness suddenly breaks out in the northern border camp. The afflicted soldiers are completely paralyzed, their bodies turning as stiff as stone. This bizarre plague spreads at a terrifying speed. In just 3 days, dozens of elite soldiers have already collapsed. I rush to the camp with a physician to investigate, only to realize this is no ordinary illness. They have been poisoned with an extremely rare and deadly curse. The symptoms are an exact match for the Stoneheart curse recorded in Yanfei's final journals. Pi Xing's face turns deathly pale. In all the world, only those of the Mahjong royal bloodline can trigger the Stoneheart curse. This is a blatant attempt by someone to weaponize his true identity against him. It seems that even though Pei Jingwan is gone, the remaining factions hiding in the shadows are still active. The enemy still refuses to let go of the northern border. Pi Xing ordered a lockdown on the military camp overnight, forbidding anyone from entering or leaving. I stayed behind in the manor,
flipping through my grandmother's old journals, desperately searching for any clue to fight the ghoul poison. On the very last page,
I discovered a hidden, yellowed slip of paper.
there were only a few brief words written on it. If the heart is ensnared, only the waters of Yanmen can suppress it. Like a flash of lightning, the location of that ancient tomb crossed my mind. There is a hidden spring just outside Tinman Pass.
Rumor has it that General Li and Shen Qinghe dug it themselves. Could that spring be more than just a source of water?
Could it be the ultimate weapon to destroy this dark Miao magic? I decided to search for that hidden spring myself, keeping Pei Sihing completely in the dark. But the moment I stepped into the desolate wasteland where the tomb had collapsed, I realized the surroundings were so dead silent that even the birds had stopped singing. Out of the darkness, a pair of glowing green eyes locked onto the back of my neck. I spun around instantly, only to see a silhouette swaying in the shadows. Those eerie glowing green eyes were filled with a chilling, deathly silence. As I drew my torch closer, I finally saw the person's face clearly.
It was Shen Qinghe.
Her face was a ghostly, pale white, and her once beautiful features were now covered in horrifying, twisted runes. She had clearly been turned into a puppet of the Stoneheart goo. Shen Qinghe, you finally showed up.
Shen Qinghe hadn't died in the chaos back in the capital. Instead, consumed by her final descent into madness,
She had become a mere pawn in the hands of the Mao remnants. She raised her withered, skeletal hand, and with a slight twitch of her fingers, the half-petrified puppet soldiers around us began to close in on me. The hidden spring mentioned in my grandmother's journal had to be nearby. It was my only shot at survival. Shen Qinghe let out a sharp, piercing sneer. Just as my life hung by a thread, the ground beneath us began to shake violently.
the dirt nearby cracked open.
And a jet of crystal-clear spring water shot up into the air. The spring that my grandmother, Shen Qinghe, had dug all those years ago had burst forth. The gushing water drenched the hem of my dress and splashed all over those puppet soldiers, and their petrified bodies actually began to crack and shatter with an ear-splitting screech. Right then, Pei Xing's figure appears at the edge of the spring. His long sword is pressed right against Shen Qinghe's throat. With a swift flash, his blade slices through the night sky,
Instantly severing the connection between Shen Qinghe and her ice puppets.
Under the sheer force of Pei Sihing's sword energy, the surging dark spring water erupts into a fine, misty rain. As the moisture drapes over them, the petrified soldiers actually begin crumbling into ash, one by one.
My dear Shen Qinghe,
You should have turned to ash in that fire long ago. Killing me won't do you any good. Pei Sihing, the bloodline inside you is the greatest curse in this world. Do you really think Shen Qinghe will stay with you until you're old and gray? Throwing caution to the wind, I rush to Pei Sihing's side and grab his arm. I can feel his body trembling slightly. It's a sign that the backlash is taking its full toll on him. With a piercing, agonizing shriek, Shen Qinghe's body begins to petrify on its own. In the end, she shatters into a pile of cold, lifeless stone. With Shen Qinghe gone, the plague spreading through the military camp finally shows signs of easing.
Pishisan sways slightly.
Suddenly coughing up a mouthful of black blood and collapses right into my arms. As I hold him, a chilling sense of dread washes over me. I take Pei Sihing back to the edge of the spring. The spring water glows with a warm, gentle light, temporarily suppressing the backlash inside him. Even in his unconscious state, Pei Sihing grips my hand tightly, constantly murmuring fragmented memories of his past rebirths. It turns out the pain he endured was far deeper and heavier than anything I had ever seen. Among the ruins of the ancient tomb, we discover a stone tablet buried by time. Carved in it is Yanfei's confession from years ago. It turns out the so-called Stoneheart Bone was never meant to bring chaos to the empire. Instead, it was a seal placed by the Mao tribe to guard the northern border and suppress the malevolent energy deep underground. And the bloodline flowing within Pei Sihing is actually the final key to this seal.
Pei Sihing slowly opens his eyes.
A half of a successive form. It is the face of Pir. The key engine mother man, Sestic another.
He looks at the stone tablet.
A bitter smile gracing his lips. So, my struggle to escape in this life? Have been doing hands for a few minutes. Well, it's okay to work down with you. At this very moment, the messenger sent by the new emperor, Pei Sihing, has already arrived in Beijing. He didn't just bring an imperial decree of commendation, but also a secret letter left behind by Pei Jingwan before his death. Inside, he revealed the absolute greatest lie concerning the Shen family. The real reason why the old matriarch of the Shen family risked her life to defend Yanmen Pass all those years ago. I broke the seal on that long-buried letter, and the handwriting made my fingers tremble uncontrollably. It read that the matriarch wasn't guarding the Pei family's empire, but a world-ending catastrophe buried deep beneath the earth of Beijing. A yellowed scroll of parchment slipped out from the envelope. It was written in the hand of my grandmother, Shen Qinghe. As it turned out, the Shen ancestor and the founding emperor of the Pei family had made a secret pact. One branch of the Shen descendants must guard Beijing for all eternity, because suppressed beneath this land is the calibre of the past world, which robs people of their minds, driving them to slaughter one another. My sweet Jia Zhao. By the time you read this, you will probably have understood your grandmother's helplessness. The words on the page felt like grandmother, whispering right into my ear.
都配景完小了入墨。
His imperial dragon aura was already completely spent. Only Pei King's half-male bloodline, combined with the Shen family's war soul, to completely put an end to this catastrophe. I looked over at Pei King, who was inspecting the training grounds. He sat tall on his horse, his pitch-black cloak billowing and snapping in the wind. He had never told me that to protect this land, he had to endure agonizing pain every single day, as if his very blood was being sliced by 1,000 blades. Every single step he planned was actually to pave the way for me, so that even if he was no longer around one day, I could still live a safe and peaceful life in this world. Just then, the sky over Beijing suddenly turned dark and ominous. On the distant wasteland, a massive horde of eerie, unseen figures emerged. They didn't look like Manchu cavalry. They looked more like phantoms crawling out from the deepest depths of the earth, clutching strange weapons that could wither the very grass and trees. Pei Shixing suddenly drew the longsword from his waist, pointing it toward the oncoming shadow. An unprecedented fire of battle ignited in his eyes. He turned back to look at me and smiled, a smile filled with the tender warmth of a final farewell. Wait for me to come back. Let's go to Majiang to see the blossoms. This was the most brutal, devastating battle I had ever witnessed at Amin Pass. What filled the sky wasn't a rain of swords, but a suffocating black mist devouring every last drop of life. Pi Shixing led the elites of the Yan Prince's manor, charging straight into those eerie, ghostly figures. At that exact moment, the ancient power in his bloodline erupted. The longsword in his hand transformed into a blinding beam of blood-red light, and the dark shadows completely dissipated. I stood on the city wall, holding our child tightly in my arms, my tears dripping one by one onto the cold stone. I saw my grandmother's heroic spirit appearing in the sky. She was still clad in her silver armor and white robe, her spear pointing the way forward for Pei Kang. This wasn't just a war of the mortal realm. It was a reckoning, spanning 2 lifetimes. Don't cry, little new. Daddy will win. The child's tender voice echoed in my ear, and in his eyes, which looked so much like Pei Xing's, was a resolve far beyond his years. At that moment, I felt as if the seeds of hope were sprouting from this blood-soaked land. Finally, as the first ray of morning light pierced through the gloom of the northern border, the shadows lingering over the wasteland vanished completely. Pei Xing stood leaning on his sword, with his back to the rising sun, slowly walking back toward the city wall. His white hair looked blindingly bright in the sunlight. But at that moment, I knew we had won. We didn't return to Jingling. Instead, we stayed here at Yamen Pass. Years later, when the spring grass once again covered the hills of the northern border, I discovered a letter I had never seen before at my grandmother's grave. The signature on it was actually Shen Qinghe. Spring on the northern border had finally, truly settled in. The spring grass outside the pass grew wild, and the vibrant green stretched all the way to the horizon. As I paid my respects at the grave of my grandmother, the Dowager Marquisia, a gentle breeze brushed past, and I noticed a yellowed letter tucked into a crevice of the tombstone. My heart pounded wildly. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. The moment I saw the signature clearly, I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. It was indeed my grandmother's handwriting, yet it was absolutely not a relic left behind from either my past life or this one. The letter read, Jai Zhou. By the time you read this, I will have already returned to where I truly belong. The 10 years I spent serving under the Emperor didn't just buy you your rebirth. They also allowed me to see the true nature of fate and karma in this world. Now that the malevolent energy sealed beneath Yamen Pass has dispersed, the bloodline shackles binding Pei Xing have finally been broken. From this moment on, nothing will ever hold either of you back again. I watched in silence as the parchment dissolved into a flurry of golden light, scattering into the wind. So, grandmother never really left us. She used the very last of her soul to sweep away the final shadows hanging over our lives. Pi Shixing quietly walked up behind me. His hair, once turned pure white by the backlash of the forbidden spell, now miraculously gleamed jet black under the warm sunlight. The fierce intensity in his eyes had melted into a deep, endless warmth. We stood hand in hand on the mountaintop, looking down at the bustling, lively marketplace in the distance, and watching our child run freely across the vast fields. Our destiny in this lifetime is finally complete. Pi Shixing laced his fingers tightly through mine, whispering softly in my ear, "The spring breeze is beautiful today. Shall we take a stroll into the city?" But just as everyone was basking in the joy of this newfound peace, stunning news arrived from Jinling City. It was said that while the new emperor, Pei King, was sorting through the late Pei Jingwen's belongings, he discovered a half-piece of the legendary Shen family commander's seal, one that had never before seen the light of day. This half-seal alone could command the forces of the great Qi Empire, summoning the secret shadow guards who had been dormant for over 100 years. As for the other half,
Rumor had it that it was hidden right inside my dowry. A secret envoy from Jinling rode through the night without rest,
delivering a personal letter from the new emperor straight to the Prince of Yan's estate. Pi Xing broke the seal and opened the letter, his expression instantly darkening.
The sudden emergence of that Shen family commander's seal
Meant that the newly pacified imperial court was about to face yet another violent storm.
and the missing half mentioned in the letter was highly likely hidden inside the grand dowry grandmother had prepared for me all those years ago. I immediately summoned Xinla, ordered her to open the heavy mahogany chest that had been sealed away in the deepest corner of the storehouse. Inside lay the bridal gown grandmother had hand-stitched herself, alongside glittering gold and silver jewelry. Every single item carried the warmth of her profound, everlasting love. I searched through every hidden compartment,
But I found absolutely nothing.
Pei Xing picked up the gemstone hairpin that Pei Jingwen had sent me for my birthday.
The one I had locked away and hidden.
As he applied a little pressure with his fingertips,
The ruby at the end of the hairpin suddenly made a faint click. A tiny, tightly rolled piece of parchment slid out.
it wasn't the commander's seal, but a map showing where the real seal was hidden. Before he died, Pei Jingwen
Had ultimately returned the Shen family's final trump card. To you.
It turned out the commander's seal had never been in the hands of the Pei family.
It was all a decoy, intentionally set up by grandmother to protect the Shen family.
The real secret guards of the Shen family had actually been hiding in the Yamen Pass garrison all along.
They weren't defending the imperial throne.
They were defending the honor and spirit of the Shen family.
Following the map's guidance, we arrived at a cliff in the northern border. It was the very spot where I jumped to my death in my past life.
And the starting point of everything in this life.
At the bottom of the cliff, a grave-guarding old man had been waiting for us for 30 long years.
At the edge of the cliff, the wind howled furiously,
As if the tragic echoes of my past life still lingered there.
holding Pei Xing's hand.
I slowly walked down the narrow stone steps.
In front of a cave halfway down the cliff, an old man in a tattered gray robe sat in silence. 2 cups of fresh tea were laid out before him.
You've arrived.
To my absolute shock, I realized he was the Shen family's old butler, who had been missing for years. He hadn't been guarding this place for treasure,
But to wait for a descendant of the Shen family to personally reclaim the half-seal capable of turning the world upside down.
the moment I held the military token in my hand,
A cold, unyielding power surged from my fingertips through my entire body. Young mistress, the old matriarch once said,
if you live a happy life in this lifetime, this token shall remain buried forever.
but if you were to suffer the same tragic fate again,
This will be the sharpest blade the Shen family leaves you for your revenge. Grandmother had anticipated every single possibility for me. She had paved every single path of retreat to absolute perfection.
皮西挺多的头个，
without a single moment of hesitation,
With a sharp flick of my wrist, I tossed it straight into the bottomless, raging torrent.
He turned around and pulled me tightly into his arms.
Standing on that cliff, beneath a sky full of stars, he made a solemn promise to me.
The commander's seal sank deep into the water, symbolizing Shenjai's complete withdrawal from the battle for control of the Wamquan. But just as we were preparing to head back to the city,
Shen Qinghe,
who was supposed to be completely mindless, suddenly appeared on the cliff. Her eyes were sharp and clear, and in her hand, she clutched a poison-tipped dagger. He lunged at me in a mad frenzy. If I can't have him, you won't either. Shen Qinghe's sudden appearance caught everyone completely off guard.
no one knew how she had managed to escape from Prince Sign's manor.
By now, her body was completely withered, and her once beautiful face was twisted into a hideous, terrifying mask of pure hatred.
Shen Qinghe, why do you get to be loved by everyone?
Why is your life so perfect just because you got a second chance? It turned out that during her madness, she had caught fleeting glimpses of her past life in her dreams. She was consumed by resentment. She couldn't accept that despite all her schemes, she had ended up with such a tragic, pathetic end.
Pei Xing reacted in an instant, stepping sideways to shield me with his body. So,
A powerful strike swept forward. After all, Shen Qinghe was just a weak woman. How could she possibly withstand such a thunderous blow? Like a kite with a broken string, she was thrown backward through the air and crashed violently against the rocks.
Shen Qinghe.
You never lost to me. You lost to yourself. Shen Qinghe's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something,
and in the end, she only let out a cold, resentful sneer.
Her head slumped to the side, and her breath left her forever.
At last, all the grudges and hatred came to an end on the edge of this cliff.
身处就 stop.
Marked the total collapse of the old factions. The northern border welcomed its quietest New Year's Eve Yet, on the morning of New Year's Day,
His Paisizong pushed open the door. He found the entire courtyard filled with blooming, fiery red camellias. Within the sweet fragrance of the flowers, grandmother's hearty laughter seemed to echo from afar. The snow in Jinling had not yet melted. Yet, Yamen Pass is already bathed in the warmth of spring. The camellias filling the courtyard are blooming as red as fire. Those were the flowers my grandmother, old Madame Shen, loved the most.
Peace and and I hold our child's hand, walking down a path blanketed in fallen petals.
It is as if grandmother's stern yet gentle voice still echoes in the air, offering her loving advice.
My father, Shen Qinghe, runs a small private school in Beijing.
He teaches the children how to read and write every day. His later years are peaceful and serene. Pi Ziking is governing Jinling with great dedication. It's full
And frequently exchanges letters with Pei Sihen to seek his guidance on military command.
As for us, we stand guard over Yamen Pass, protecting this land that grandmother sacrificed her life to defend, living the most ordinary yet most precious of lives.
Pisa Singh wraps his arms around my waist from behind,
Resting his chin gently on my shoulder. Our child chases butterflies among the flowers, their crisp, sweet laughter ringing out.
Having been given a second chance at life,
I finally understand what true happiness really means. He. Look how beautifully the flowers are blooming. Pisa Xing's voice is filled with warmth and laughter. I look up, watching the petals dance across the sky, and my heart completely overflows with warmth. There are no more wars at Yamen Pass,
owing endless spring grass in a sea of brilliant blossoms.
In this lifetime, Shen Qinghe has finally found her happy ending.